Hey, everybody.
Hello.
I'm Kyle Tothill. This is Vishak, Mallya. Today, we're going to be talking a little bit about facing adversity with optimism and resilience, and we're going to do that with a DEI lens. I and Vishak are waiting for two of our super guests, Sophia Wallace, who's the SVP of Education and Engagement at Elavin, and Sophia Zeinu, who is the VP of Inclusion Strategies and Engagement Strategies at WarnerMedia. So we've got a really good group of panelists today. Vishak, do you want to introduce yourself, and then I'll introduce myself after that?
Absolutely. Thanks, Kyle. Again, my name is Vishak Mallya, and I'm here Senior Vice President at Pyramid Consulting, where I lead a group known as GenSpark. And GenSpark is focused around creating opportunities for underserved minorities, especially in the early career phase of their life, right? So very happy to be here and talking to all of you.
Outstanding. Terra, so happy you could join us. Right?
Yes.
I'm going to take over on the MC duties until Sophia gets here.
Sure.
So
can you hear
me? If you want to introduce yourself, that would be awesome.
Yeah. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Awesome. So my name is Terra Wallace, and I'm the SVP of Sales Education and Engagement for our North American Revenue Organization for Elavin U.S. Bank. So, and I also do quite a bit of work with our DE&I teams. So I lead our Black Heritage Business Resource Group for the Atlanta market, and I co-chair our Black Atlanta Leadership Council. So super excited to be here.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So I'm Kyle Tothill. I'm the CEO of eHire. We specialize in building high-performance teams for a diverse set of companies around the country and here in Atlanta. I also serve as the vice chairman of TAG, and I'm on the board of the Social Justice and Equity Task Force, which is actually turning out to be a fantastic new program we're going to launch here in the latter part of the year. So really excited about that, excited about this topic. Vishak, I'm going to start with you. Tell us a little bit about how GenSpark is focusing on early career development and how that's affecting ultimately kind of the marginalized communities and how that's helping out. Hi, Sophia.
Hey, Sophia. Do we want to introduce Sophia?
Go ahead. I stole your first question, Sophia. So go ahead, Vishak.
No worries. Thanks, Kyle, for that. So, so GenSpark, just to give a little bit of context, Pyramid Consulting has been in the staffing space for about 25 years. We saw the whole industry evolving in kind of the need for technology in various parts of the industry, right? But one constant theme that we were seeing is that there's massive underrepresentation of minorities, especially in the technology space. And the reason for this is various, right? One is the lack of opportunity, and second is unconscious bias sometimes creeping in during selection processes. So in order to look at all this, that was the genesis of how GenSpark came about, where we wanted to concentrate, get DE&I into our DNA and make that reflect in everything starting from how we approach people who fall in those underserved minorities, how we give them opportunities to be placed against mainstream roles, and how we can actually take their careers to the next level, right? So that's how the whole thing came about. In the last year, so we started this journey about 2 years back. We were doing pretty well, but last year the pandemic obviously hit, and lots of people, their whole hiring process completely changed. And one of the things that we were doing at GenSpark is we would bring in people from community colleges, sometimes even folks without college degrees, bring them into classrooms, train them on those skills that would make them work ready. Now we had a new problem. People could not come to classrooms. People did not have the infrastructure. So that was the biggest adversity that we faced. How do we still empower people? Thanks to some wonderful partners, sponsors, and clients, we were able to create the infrastructure necessary to actually send out laptops to people who did not have those. We were able to create virtual classrooms for people who could not afford to travel to come to us. And I think that has been a fabulous journey, very rewarding. And I know that earlier today, Maurice had spoken about 110. I think it's a wonderful organization. We are lucky enough to be selected as education partners or talent partners with them. That again gives a tremendous stage for people again coming from the marginalized communities to be able to apply to jobs that otherwise are not even kind of in their whole radar, right? So I think it is there was a lot of adversity, but I think it is all been a combined effort, a combination of organizations that are striving to make a difference, as well as great clients out there who really want to make a difference to this, or contributing to that success. So that is something about GenSpark and how we came across.
That's really, really cool. I'm sure there's plenty of other comments on that, and we can pause on that while we get Sophia introduced. Thank you for joining us, Sophia.
Thank you.
I give you back the MC duties.
Thank you so much, Kyle, for managing while I was going through some technical challenges. So hi, everyone. I'm Sophia Zeinu. I'm the VP of Equity and Inclusion Strategies for WarnerMedia, and I'm really excited to spend the time with you with this wonderful panel. A lot of the work that we do at WarnerMedia is really about in the face of a very, I would say, challenging industry where things are changing all of the time, where, we're facing adversity on many levels, really thinking about how we think about, systems and structures and really disrupting those in a very, transformative way to really embed equity and inclusion into everything that we do. So it's very top of mind, for us and for the work that we do. I know, as we kind of continue to introduce the panel, I know, Terra, if you want to share a little bit more about you and your organization, the work that you all are doing.
So I can't hear you that well. Sophia, say it one more time for me.
Oh, sure. Sorry. I was just saying for you to give you an opportunity to share a bit about you and your organization.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think US Bank and Elavin, like most companies, I think, all of us are kind of in that space of trying to figure out kind of long-term strategies, right? So what can we do, kind of immediate quick wins, but then how do we develop longer term DEI strategies that we can embed into the organization? So, I'll just, kind of gave an introduction, but a little bit about kind of some of the actual work that's happening that I'm really excited about is really how we've thought about community different. So, I think we've always had exceptional relationships and partnerships in community, and we've done a lot of work with, some of the larger Atlanta organizations that most folks are very well know a lot about. Your Habitats for Humanity, which is also an awesome opportunity and is always a great opportunity to give to that organization and help out. And then there's also a lot of the work that we've done with Junior Achievement, which really highlights a lot of financial literacy. A lot of times those programs do serve underserved communities and marginalized communities. So we've always been really active there. And we've always been really active, just around the schools, right? The schools that are kind of right in our area. How can we, help with internship workshops or career development workshops, or how do we kind of allow ourselves to get entrenched in the community that way? One of the things I've been super excited about, though, that's happened kind of as a bit of a shift for us is really how we think about how we support small Black businesses differently. When we think about the racial wealth gap, and we know that that's, a real thing, right? So how do we think about the way that we support minority-owned and Black businesses in a very intentional way has been a part of our broader DE&I strategy as well. So we've tried to look at it from a few different lenses, from a recruitment lens, which like Vishak said, which is so important, right? And having that pipeline, connecting with those colleges and universities. We've also tried to look at it from a workplace. What about our employees and the pulse of our employees and organization, how we're developing and retaining talent that's in-house and not necessarily just thinking about diversity as bringing external talent into your organization. So it's really important to really develop that talent that you have in-house and make sure that you're helping those folks to really get to that next level. Because those are folks who are invested in your organization, who have already given to your organization's success. And so they should absolutely be part of that DE&I strategy and how we help them to evolve and grow. The other part has been around supplier diversity. How do we look at our spend differently? right? So part of, having a diverse business is also who you do business with. And so when we think about our suppliers, how diverse are we there? Where's our spend going? How many companies are we actually doing business with that fall into these different minority categories, whether it be women, LGBTQ, African American, Hispanic? There's a whole scope there that we need to think about. So we've really honed in on supplier diversity as well, and then community, which is a really big one, and I'm super excited about that. One of the big ones that we've been able to really bring in this year with the Russell Innovation Center for Entrepreneurs here in Atlanta, Georgia. So if you haven't heard of that organization, the CEO is Jay Bailey, and a little bit about that story, right? H.J. Jerome Russell, the Russell Company was the largest construction company, Black-owned construction company in the world at one point, during a very tough time here in the South. And so pretty much built quite a bit of our Atlanta skyline as we know it. And as homage to that, has built about a 50,000 square foot entrepreneurial hub on the west side of Atlanta, right up the street from Mercedes-Benz Stadium, where they are actively working with Black business owners to really help them to flush out their entrepreneurial ideas and then get them to that next level of scale, how they can actually grow their business and add staff and increase, again, closing that racial wealth gaps really does start with the businesses in our community. So we invested a $450,000, made a $450,000 financial investment into that organization. And, we're looking at that 3-prong. So time, talent, and treasure, right? We all know how it is to be able to open up the checkbook, which is essential for a lot of these organizations, but we have to be able to meet them, book in that financial investment with our time and also with our talent and the business executives that are a part of our company, really going into community and offering their expertise and their knowledge is often what these business owners really need, right? They need to understand a bit more about P&L and forecasting and, how to get their payment processing and, banking and loans. And so our ability to go into that community and share our expertise, I think is the real value outside of just the dollar amount. So I've been super excited with a lot of the work that we've done and really excited with where a lot of that's going to take us.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Terra. It sounds incredible, like all of the work that you all are doing. And I think what I particularly like about it is that it's really comprehensive, right? It's not kind of just focusing on one thing, or as you said, just opening up the checkbook, but really thinking holistically about how you can start to move the needle, which I think is, definitely something that we all want to think about. And, I'd love to hear even from you, Kyle and Vishak, as you think about addressing this in a very holistic way. There are often, in a way that many times and many organizations haven't done in the past, you often will face different challenges and adversity. And so want to hear more about your thoughts on how you might think about that, why that's important, how you might overcome some of those challenges, as you are starting to really address it in that way.
Number one, I want to congratulate Terra for flipping to the mobile device to get on today. She's already faced adversity here today. So I want to say we were going back and forth on chat, so I'm down with that. So appreciate you very much. I think one of the things that we're working on currently, right, and how we've kind of leaned into the problem is thinking about what's happened in the last 18 months. Okay. And two major things that have happened that I think are shaping the conversation from our point of view. Number one, I think awareness has become huge from a D&I perspective. It's exploded. I mean, that's the obvious statement. It's one of the reasons that we're here today and that we're focusing on that. And so the other part of that is the solution, which I believe is access. And I think, I congratulate all the firms, and I know lots of great ones that are providing access, right, and equitable access, to the right resources. So what we're focused on right now is building mentorship programs and pathways to leadership for, people of color, specifically in Atlanta and Georgia, and providing them access to very senior level people, specifically at the board level of TAG and other senior leaders, and getting mentorship, sustained programmatic mentorship programs together so that we can help people elevate that never would have had those opportunities or those introductions before because of all the systemic barriers that exist, right, spoken and unspoken. And we're helping to break those barriers down. And our goal is to have, cohorts after cohort after cohort, and expand that cohort and bring those folks through the process, right, so that we can get the right type of access to decision makers, right? Understand what large organizations are buying and paying for and investing in, and the trends that they're focused on, and literally just the concept of networking and being inclusive. And I think, when we talk about TAG, we talk about cleaning up our own house first, right? We've made a lot of meaningful strides to diversify our boards of our societies. And I think, we were kind of caught off guard by some of the feedback that we got from our task force. It's just in terms of the way we were viewed. We heard things like, "Oh, it's just a good old boys club." And we're like, "What are you talking about? We're really nice people, blah, blah, blah." And the reality is that we weren't paying very much attention, And so I'm really excited to be a part of what we're doing at TAG, and then at eHire, the company that I run every single day. I think the D&I issue is a long haul process. We've got a lot of things that have happened over the last 100 years or so that have really create physical and societal barriers that we're trying to break down. And so one of the things that we're encouraging our organizations and our client companies to do, including our own, is to build long-standing relationships and make a very long-term commitment. This problem will not be filled up, in a year. It's not going to be solved, although I think we made a lot of great progress. This is a very long tail problem that's going to require very meaningful investments. So I'm challenging our customers to make longer term investments, hire people in D&I, hire people, even at that middle enterprise level where those budget decisions are very important. It's one thing to be Elavin or US Bank or, WarnerMedia, where you're multi-billion dollars and you can spend several millions of dollars. It's another thing to be an $800 million company or an $80 million company and start to make those investments. So I think when I think about the silver linings of the last 18 months, you have to think about those, because otherwise you're going to get pretty depressed, right? I think about equity and access as our levers, and I think about awareness driving those decisions.
No, I love that. Our leader, Christy Haberger, always says, talent is equally distributed, but opportunities are not. And
That's right. That's absolutely right.
I think that really goes exactly to what you're saying, Kyle, and really the work to be done to increase access, to those opportunities, to those senior leaders, to those development and advancement opportunities. So I think that's really great. And Vishak, is there anything you want to add on that point?
Yeah, I think Kyle hit upon a great point about access, and he did mention about silver linings, right? So the one silver lining that I look to is due to this pandemic, one thing that we've all realized is that technology can be the answer to many of these things, right? Especially the fact that there's been a change in mindset that you don't need a person sitting next to you to do a job as good. I think that has been kind of mind-opening, and what that does is it creates that equity. So if there is a job where a client, an organization is willing to give a chance to a person to work remotely from their house, and I'm quoting a real-life example, a young single mother based out of Atlanta who cannot relocate to Charlotte for a good opportunity, now suddenly that same opportunity is being opened up to her, right? That's amazing, right? And in reality, when we see that people actually have to travel for opportunities, that really cuts down the real opportunity for many of these people. Again, I use an anecdote. One of our clients needed people to travel to Colorado, and we had 5 people go to the client office. 4 of them did not even get onto their planes on time, and we were trying to wonder what went wrong. The fact is that they had not even boarded a plane ever in their life, right? And I mean, it's just something that we all assume that is common, but honestly, technology being there, remote work, having that openness that, hey, you have to give people an opportunity to perform wherever they are. Like you said, Sophia, talent access in various pools. So understanding of that and understanding people's situations and allowing them to be flexible, I think that's been a tremendous boon to us. We see more and more clients, especially technology organizations of clients in retail and healthcare sectors saying, in the foreseeable future, we're not coming back to work. You provide us talent, regardless of where they are. That truly opens up, and we are partnering with TAG actually to go to rural Georgia, not having to uproot some of the people from where they are, but creating that opportunity for them in different parts of the country. So I look at that as a blessing. The fact that technology and access has been opened up due to the pandemic. So that's the silver lining that I'm looking at, and it honestly has created a world of difference for us.
I love that. I love the idea of really thinking about in this time, in this last 18 months, where there have been so many challenges and there's so many, adversities that so many organizations and individuals are really facing, really finding those silver linings. And particularly as, many of us have gone back home and, worked remotely, that being actually an opportunity to really expand the talent pool and rethink, right, what are some of the norms that have historically been embedded to how we think about accessing talent and where folks can be, in order to really get work done. So I really love that. I'd love to hear from you, Terra or Kyle. What other, I guess, silver linings or things that you've seen over these last 18 months that have really kind of kept you hopeful and excited and really optimistic about the ability and opportunity to really make meaningful progress? Maybe Kyle, I'll start with you.
Well, I mean, I think number one, I think what companies like Vishak, I think Terra is struggling a little bit, like the concept of looking at the remote workforce, as a way to expand your recruiting footprint. So one of the things that look at an employer like maybe in Chastain or Kennesaw, right? That's not a traditionally super diverse area, right? But it was hard to commute to, So accessing that talent pool, in Atlanta was complex, right? And it's expensive for the people that live there to commute to there, and so they basically drew a map around that area, and that's how it was. And they were the employer of choice for that specific area. Now you can be the employer of choice in your time zone. Right? There are no limitations. And that's optimism. That's looking at the other side of the coin, right? That's providing a basically barrier-free opportunity to completely expand and diversify your workforce. And we're seeing companies do it. We're also seeing organizations be realistic about where they can make the most impact within their organization. And we have a challenge with the pipeline, for diverse candidates, for underserved, folks that are at the executive level and that are at the, at the board level. And we've been focusing on this issue specifically in the female area for women in technology or women in the business for quite a while. 25 or 30 years, it's been a topic, and it's gained a lot of momentum, and we put a lot of traction into it. And now you have a very meaningful and substantial long-term pipeline. So we have a working model. We've got to take that same model with the access capabilities that technology presents us and replicate that. And that's not going to be easy to do. But what I'm most optimistic about, what I'm seeing is continued progress, continued investment, continued narrative. This conversation has not stopped. It has not slowed down. It's only gaining momentum right now. And our city and our community are benefiting from that. And the people in the city will benefit from that. But it won't be overnight, And when you talk about access, Vishak, 15, 20 years ago, it was about building a rail line from Atlanta to Alpharetta. Literally, billions of dollars of rail to get, people from point A to point B. And that's no longer an issue anymore. And that's a massive shift that people don't understand. They don't realize how big of an access opportunity that is. So if you hear the energy in my voice, it's because real progress is being made. And some of these, constructs have us with the capability to be able to actually execute.
Yeah, I love that. I think that the idea of part of what keeps you hopeful is that the conversation hasn't stopped, right? I think that there was a lot of fear after, the murder of George Floyd, that it would be, a moment in time where everyone would rally and then, people would shift their focus and energy onto other things. And I think to your point, to the extent that leaders in organizations are continuing to have the conversation, really taking it, having a strategy in place that is long-term, really recognizing that this is not something that's going to be solved overnight. It wasn't created overnight and won't be solved overnight, and really becoming a core part of the business model, right? So the examples that you shared, Kyle, I think are so important, right? As we think about what makes us optimistic and how do we kind of systematize that optimism in the way that we operate so that it is always part of the conversation, that it's not happenstance, that it is just part of the way that we operate. So I think that's great. And I was trying to wait till Terra gets back on. Can you hear us now?
Sorry.
Oh, no, you're good. You're good. I just want to make sure you have an opportunity to share. No, all good. We were just talking about, in this kind of space where there can feel like there is so much adversity, we are trying to solve something that it is going to require a long-term investment and support. What are the silver linings that you've seen? What keeps you hopeful? What are those signals of progress that you've seen that really keep you, motivated, either at your organization or just more broadly?
Yeah, I think, I think it's a combination of things. I think it's that we're still talking about it, right? One of the things that we talked a lot about in my organization, and you would hear a lot of feedback, was we don't want a moment, we want a movement, right? Like, so it's important that it's not a moment, and that it's a movement, and that we continue to move forward and have the conversations. And then there was a lot of talk about how do you build in real accountability, right? Like, it is a long-term issue. It's no way that we can, if we put every collective effort we have at it over the next 24 months, we wouldn't solve it, right? But we'd be a heck of a lot further, right? And that's our goal. The goal is movement and progression. So I think if anything keeps me hopeful and kind of optimistic, it's that we're still having the conversations, right? You're not saying D&I and somebody's going, oh God, why do we have to talk about that, right? It's not as uncomfortable as it used to be to bring it up, because before you didn't mention it and you didn't talk about it because you didn't want to make somebody else uncomfortable, and or sometimes you don't know how to broach a subject. And that's the honesty that we can, sometimes the transparency of, like, I really don't know how to have this conversation, right? I want to lean in, but I'm not sure what to say. I don't want to be offensive. And that was always a big thing, especially for allies of people of color. It's like, how do I lean in, show my support, be a real ally, but not do anything that's deemed offensive? And everybody's just trying to figure it out. We're all on our kind of own journey to inclusion, and everybody's at a different place, right? So what I can appreciate is that we are still having the conversations. We're getting more comfortable, sometimes with just being able to say, I don't know what I don't know. We are empowering people, I think, to have the conversations, and we're encouraging, education, right? Educate yourself around the issues as leaders, as individuals, and then have those open conversations in safe spaces, like building that psychological safety where you can ask a question and you're not going to, be snapped at, or, somebody's going to feel like, oh gosh, because when you do that, you prevent people from wanting to lean in the next time. And so we all have to offer some grace along the way on the journey. And I think that that's one of the things that keeps me really optimistic, is you're seeing people really have a lot more, I think, receptivity to change. And, folks are kind of starting to understand that about exclusion, and it really is about equity. We've started to talk about what equity means, right? It's not just inviting everybody to the party. It's making sure everyone dances, right? So there's a lot more to it. We're having the conversations, we're breaking it down. You used to just say diversity and inclusion, and it was just kind of like, it was so broad, right? Like, what does that even mean? I'm diverse, I feel included, right? Like, so you got to really start having specific narratives, and I think just everybody being open to learning. And if there's a genuine and sincere desire, or a genuine and sincere intention, when you're not sure, someone will feel that, right? You always can feel the difference between the person who's leaning in because they sincerely want to understand something better, and then the transactional lean in. And so I think that those are things to always stay mindful of, right? Like, there really is a difference. And what makes me optimistic is that I think I'm feeling a lot more of that real intentional leaning in across my organization, and just in contact with other people in general. Yep. It doesn't feel anywhere near as taboo as it did, let's say, 18 months ago.
That's it, right? Sophia, I'm just curious to ask you a question. Tell us about how what really inclusion means to someone from the outside, and what can organizations really do? Because you hear a lot about, and this is the biggest challenge I see, right, is that, it's a very tight labor market. So very talented people of color are like the most in demand of any market at any time in history, right? But not all of those folks want to work at certain places because they don't feel included. How can organizations really examine how inclusive they are in terms of being welcoming to other folks?
Yeah, I mean, I think in my mind, there's a couple different ways, right? So if you think about doing it at scale, so I mean, that will generally be looking at things like your exit surveys and making sure that your exit surveys have enough specificity in the questions that you're asking to get the real deal on why people are leaving. Because to your point, we are in the midst of this great resignation or reshuffle or whatever you call it, and so there is a lot of data to be gained from those who are leaving to understand why they're leaving, and if there's something culturally that you need to really look into, examine, address, to make sure that it is a place that people want to come to. I would say the other thing I know we do is we have like an employee experience survey that specifically calls out an equity and inclusion index. So we know not only looking at experience overall, but specifically looking at it through the lens of equity and inclusion. And then also looking at and slicing and dicing that data by different demographic groups to understand how different individuals or groups of individuals are experiencing the organizations, because that's really where you start to understand the differences and distinctions of if you're looking at it overall versus you're looking at the experiences of, not only Black individuals or Hispanic/Latinx individuals or women or those who are non-binary, but looking at the intersection of those. And the more you cut that data and really start to dig deep, then that gives you that richness and understanding, how those individuals or communities are really experiencing. And then I would say the last thing is really talking to people and thinking about how you have, dedicated, whether it be focus groups or other mechanisms, to just talk to people before they leave, to understand, to get the real live, experiences and stories that people are facing, to understand what can you do to address it. Because what I have experienced and what I know is that there's so many microcultures within any organization. So even with any macro level expectation setting or accountability mechanism, there's so many microcosms of culture that exist within different teams and managers. And so how do you surface that? How do you address that? How do you set the right expectation that every people manager feels ownership of, and is held accountable to, as Terra was mentioning, I think is really kind of the holistic way that I know we've started to think about it. I'm sure others are similarly thinking about it in that way.
Is there anything, follow-up question, I'm playing MC for half a second. Is there anything that stands out that is like something that you've learned is pretty obvious now that you've learned it, but that companies don't do very well as it relates to inclusiveness? Like something that's just a best practice that if you think about it for a second, you'd be like, oh yeah, that makes sense. But from a large scale.
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing I've seen, and I'm sure others will have thoughts, is this idea of people having clarity on what the expectations are for them and being given feedback on a regular basis. I mean, we know through the research that women are often given nicer feedback than men, right? That they're not given honest feedback. And so there's oftentimes this disconnect between the extent, to what you're hearing and what might manifest in a performance management process, or you may not really understand or feel that your manager is invested in you because, many people know, feedback is a gift, right? It demonstrates a manager's investment in you and commitment to your success. And so when there is a disconnect between the amount of feedback that you're getting, then that really starts to question, like, is this person actually invested in my success? Do they really care, about me learning and growing in this role and getting to the next level? So I would say that is kind of one thing. I'm sure others have thoughts.
No, that's amazing. Terra, how about you?
That is good. That's a good one. I would say one of the things that I always like to it's really important as leaders to understand, diversity, equity, and inclusion relative to your business line, right? Like how does DE&I really help your business, right? Like it's not all about just being the right thing to do, which it absolutely is, but there should really be some true strategic thought there about having diverse individuals, diverse perspectives on different teams really does drive business results, right? So not, sometimes not understanding the business impact to me is something that I see across leadership, right? It's kind of just that, I've got a great team and we're driving results. So why do I need to change? And what you're trying to do there is you're trying to bring in diverse thought and diverse perspectives, right? Not just to bring in someone else in the room that doesn't look like us, but also to bring in a different point of view, different background, different experience, different lens. That's also a part of the diversity that we need to make sure that we're thinking about. That's like, yeah, that makes perfect sense. If we look at our teams across the board and say, I'm not looking at this just to say I don't have a diverse person of color on my team. I'm also looking to say, do I have diverse thought, right? A diverse way of thinking on my team, diverse ideas, perspective, innovation. A lot of that stuff comes from having diverse folks. So it's really important to really understand when we talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, we're not just talking about putting bodies in seats so that we can, right, meet quotas and goals. It really will add to a more well-rounded, I think, business line and your objectives just as well. And then the other thing I think is, I don't know if it's so much like an aha, but one of the things I always want to make sure that we're thinking about, from a minority perspective is it's really important to be mindful that this is always going to be about choosing the best person for the job. Right? We get into diversity conversations and they can really go sideways whenever we start having these conversations and a bias is drawn in that we don't know that we're having all the time that says, well, what if that person isn't the best person for the job? And, am I supposed to just hire diversity just for the sake of diversity? Absolutely not. But your pool of candidates should be diverse enough where when you make the decision for who the best person for the job is, that was an equitable and diverse candidate slate where there were more people were given the opportunity that didn't all come from the same background or look the same way or come from the same network. So a lot of times those are just the little tidbits that I want people to just remember when we're talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion. There's so many, to Sophia's point, so many microcultures and so many business lines, and we're hearing it from a 50,000 foot view from companies, large companies like mine, and it's about data and goals. But if we really get into the granular, it's about how it impacts our business, our communities. And then also it's about having diverse perspectives. And it's always about making sure we have the right people, but it's about making sure that our diverse, our candidate slate is diverse enough and our pool is diverse enough where we know that everyone had an opportunity.
Yeah, Terra, that makes a bunch of sense. Like, really what you're understanding is how does the value apply, right? So if you have a D&I culture, your valuation is not going to change, right? The business metrics are not going to change necessarily overnight. It's a longer term strategy, right? That's the way it's got to be looked at. And so I often see a lot of my clients trying to fill like a quota or having a number, which is also accountability, right? So I think you've got some things that we're figuring out as a society to try to do that. But what both of you just said, performance management and equal treatment, right? Hey, if you're not the right person for the job, I'm going to tell you. And if you're not performing well, I'm also going to tell you. And you're going to know what success looks like, which actually creates a long-term chain. And that can fight people, natural instinct to want to do the right thing right away, even though it might not be the right thing for the business.
Right.
Yeah, and I think and I know we're going to come up on time here, but I think this is why the emphasis on equity is so important, right? Because it allows you to challenge some of those norms around when we say best, do we even actually know what we mean by that? Is best actually, are we by saying best just thinking about the last person that was in the role? Or are we thinking about what is best for a ever-changing, increasingly diverse environment for the future? Right. And so really getting people to think outside, kind of break against some of these norms that they've really been used to. I mean, if you think about most people and how they post jobs, they take a past job description, update it, and then post it. Right. And they're not really rethinking what is needed for the future. And so part of this work of equity, right, and diversity, equity, and inclusion is really rethinking those norms of equity, of saying, when we talk about systems and processes, if I make a system or process more equitable, that actually benefits everyone. If I'm giving more feedback and more equitable feedback, like that doesn't just impact women, it doesn't just impact, those who identify as Black, that's better for everyone, right? If I'm more explicit and more open with the requirements that I set for a job, that's not just, yes, I'm centering the needs of those who are historically marginalized, but that also benefits so many other people. And so helping people rethink some of this, I think, is part of the push that we're doing, and why when we think about, to your question, Kyle, like goals and quotas versus how you measure progress, we really think about process measures, not just outcome measures, knowing and recognizing that some of the outcomes are going to take some time to really move the needle on. So how do you, keep optimistic, demonstrate, and really feel that progress along the way?
It's awesome. And if you see Abhishek's comment on the chat on the right, it's really, really good. It says inclusivity could be increased by creating a culture of openness, empowering all, including the junior most people in the organization, by listening to them. Is what you were talking about, listening to their ideas, thoughts, voice their concerns, and create a culture where everybody feels valued.
Yeah.
That's really well done.
Yeah. And one thing to add to that really quickly, I love that piece about, even junior. Like, I think sometimes when we start talking about diversity, we get ourselves into these programs and we start our build outs, and we even women programs, right? We say, oh, we're going to advance women leadership. And so we're going to focus on women in these roles and how do we elevate to these roles? Or we're going to focus on, people of color in these roles and how do we elevate to these roles? It's got to go as far down as your organization goes, right? Like that's inclusion, because we're still, and I always say, be careful that we're not excluding on the path to including. It's really important, because then you start to feel like, well, gosh, what about me? I'm not a senior leader, so I don't feel like I'm being catered to, or my voice is being heard. So I love that point about even the most junior. To Sophia's point, surveys, focus groups, those are really the pulse of an organization, because that's going to tell you, your people are going to tell you what they need and how they're feeling. So it's not a senior leader, right? Like, how do we get more, people of color in executive roles? Yes, that's one part of it, but how do we make sure that it's flowing throughout an entire organization so that we're not excluding a population of folks by just focusing on, some of these other type of roles?
Well, I think with that, we're probably a little over our time. So I just want to say thank you all again so much